Hello and welcome to Planet Outlook. My guest today is the well-known author and environmentalist Deepak Dalal. Thank you, Deepak, for joining us on the show.
My pleasure.
Deepak, let me begin by asking you. I know a lot of people have changed careers while studying, but you did chemical engineering in the US.
That is
And you
correct.
became a children's book author kind of thing. So what triggered you? Yeah.
Well, this actually, if any kids listening to this, it would make a lot of sense to them because they have to still make career choices. What happened was that my family, everybody's a chemical engineer. My mom, not my mom, but my dad, his cousins, my cousins, everybody is a chemical engineer because we have a chemical business. We have a business which deals with chemical engineering. So I just became an engineer because, that was the way it was meant to be. I never gave it any thought. I just left it to the way fate was, and I became an engineer. But while I was studying engineering, I found that instead of looking at engineering journals, I was looking at wildlife journals. But it didn't strike me then that I'm in the wrong place. It's when I wasted all those years graduating. You needed a degree, so I did that degree, and then after 10 years of work, I decided this was not what I wanted, and I moved out. So that's how I was an engineer. It was just the way it was with my family and the family business.
But you chose to write books for children, not novels or not other wildlife books. So what made you do that? What made you very focused into that sector of children's book?
Okay, number one, novels, adventure stories. For me, I grew up reading a lot as a kid in particular. When I was a child, I used to read a lot. It continued into college. And I love books. I love books which specifically are adventure and travel. I love those kind of books. And I used to always, as a kid, wish that I could do something. When I read a really good book, I wish that I could write something as nice as that. So that was in the sense that I'd always wanted to replicate these beautiful books I read. And then the reason I write for children is because, the adult market in India is very strong, very established, a lot of good writers. But I noticed there was this big vacuum in the children's market. We had, of course, Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond's books were great, but they're meant for little older kids, and also they're all centered around Missouri. Whereas when I came back from studying in the US, as I was working in India, that's when I started traveling across India. I mean, that's when I saw the real India besides our cities, in the sense that I went to Everest. I mean, which is not in India, of course. Everest Base Camp, Annapurna Base Camp. Then I went in the Indian Himalayas. I went to Lakshadweep. I went to the Andaman Islands, and I saw all these beautiful places. I did a lot of trekking also within our Sahyadris out here. There are no stories set in these wonderful wilderness destinations of India. And that's what got me thinking. My love for books, my love for adventure, travel, and wildlife, and all that came together. And also the fact that, I believe that children, particularly children between the age of 8 to say 12 or 13, they're still moldable then. You give them ideas, it'll go deep into them. You can actually fashion and shape their lives. Adults, not a chance. You've passed out of that golden period. That golden period is the age group which I kind of try and focus on, that I can try and connect them with wildlife, try and connect them with wilderness areas. So, that's how I basically settled on children and wildlife and adventure and travel and stories.
But how easy or how difficult was it to get the first book done?
Oh gosh. So yeah, I was looking for a location to fix my first book, and what happened was that I particularly like adventure myself. I like doing adventure sports and things like that. And one sport which I practice a lot was something called windsurfing. I guess you know what it is. Basically, a board with a sail attached to it. The most elemental form of sailing. You stand on the board, and the wind sail catches the wind, and you move. Of course, if you fall, there's nothing to help you. You fall right in the water. But we used to do a lot of this windsurfing in a lake out here called Khadakwasla Lake, and it's not very far from where I live in Pune. And we used to go every weekend, even during the week, and we used to windsurf a lot. And one day, one of the guys said, "Hey, let's do something different." So I said, "Yeah, well, what do you mean by different?" He said, "I know the person who's in charge of the Lakshadweep Islands. Um, maybe I can write to him that we'll introduce the sport of windsurfing there, and it's the seas and the coral islands. So he said, yeah, if you can do it, nothing like it. But to make a long story short, we landed up there in Lakshadweep as guests of the Lakshadweep Island government, and also we were given Doordarshan as our backup, and they said you windsurf between the islands. And so I got to, during that time, I knew nothing about the Lakshadweep Islands. I hadn't been there. Um, there were, I didn't know about lagoons. I didn't know that there were coral islands. I didn't know much about the locals. But then during this trip, we trained the locals. We stayed with the locals. We went fishing with the locals. We went scuba diving with them. And we had this incredible adventure of windsurfing between the islands. So there was the ingredients for a book. I mean, there were these beautiful islands. And I knew from a fact that if I knew nothing about it, in the sense that all I knew what the geography books, textbooks told us, that these islands are in the Arabian Sea, and they grow coconuts out there, and they catch fish. And that's the economy. That's all they taught you in school. But there's so much of these islands. The underwater world, the people, their lives, the fishing, the beauty, you know. And so I had this incredible opportunity to be with these people and live with them. And then I went back a couple of times, and that's how my first book, Lakshadweep Adventure, came about. So yeah, that's how I went about. That was my first book, and how it all began.
So, have you done books other than Lakshadweep? Basically, what I see is, though we have a long coastline, 7,000-kilometer coastline, but not much is there in popular literature about our marine life.
So, this is a story which I've been wanting to do for a long time, along the coastline. In fact, that is the book which is in the making. I love the coast. In fact, I have walked down the coast. We stuck exclusively to the coast, starting from a place called Devgarh, which is halfway down Maharashtra, all the way down south to Goa. And we decided to walk only keeping to the beaches. We were not going to go inside. We just stuck, and we saw, and the kind of, we thought Goa would be the most beautiful place, in the sense, it's known for its beaches and everything. But what we discovered on Maharashtra's beaches left Goa in the shade. They're untouched, they're beautiful, they're just amazing beaches. And so that's what got me thinking of a story in these areas. And it didn't happen, and still not yet happened, but I've been now visiting the coastline. I've been working with people who've been studying dolphins out there. I'm trying to write a story which will center on dolphins. That would be the wildlife angle. And of course, fishing and what's happening in our fishing villages. There's a lot. So that book is at the moment in research mode. But at this moment, it's been shelved because I am actually shifting my entire existing books to Penguin. And there's a little bit of rewrite and that going on. And that's occupying all my time. But the moment this ends, that's what I'll be working on. The coastline. All us 8,000 kilometers of coastline, they're just the most beautiful coastline you can think of.
You also have a fabulous series on birds.
That's right.
Which I want my viewers to kind of hear from you, from the author himself. Yeah.
Okay, so this was an idea when I started actually bird watching, and I saw the beauty of birds. And I saw that I'd missed out 25 years of my life by not doing bird watching. And I said, heck, I wish kids can be introduced to this at some, in the sense when they're young, and hook them in and make them bird watchers. And with children, the best way to communicate is always a story. I mean, stories, when they read a story, like for example, if you study history and you're asked to mug up the dates, which is what they do in school, you got to mug up this date, this happened. But you gave a story around those dates. By reading the story, the dates would come automatically. I mean, that's the effect and the power of a story. And that's the same thing which I thought, let me apply this to birds. Suppose I made stories with birds as the characters. Then that would probably build that connection. But of course, you can't just if you just write about, say, a paradise flycatcher, there's no way you can convey the beauty just in words. You have to also have pictures. You've got to have great illustrations. So these books were held up for many, many, many years because I couldn't get an illustrator. I'd written many of these stories, but I couldn't actually come out with them because I didn't have an illustrator. Then I finally stumbled on. I think nowadays our levels of illustration, particularly since computers and imagery and all became big across the country, across the world, suddenly our artists just took a huge quantum leap. And because suddenly everything was available for them, international work, they could see and they could imitate and they can do better also. And suddenly I got so many good artists. They're not just one or two now. There's so many of them who can actually do a great job. And so I've tied up with with right now I'm working with a young boy from, he's actually 23 or something years old, from Bangalore, and he does incredible work. So the thing is, for these books you need great illustrations so kids can connect with those, like a paradise flycatcher, a golden eagle, or doves. You portray them correctly, and they are also at the same time uh, characters in your story that can really create that connection. And this is what this whole series was about. Created with the idea of putting birds as the characters, and also great illustrations to connect kids with birds. That's what it's all about. And it's actually, writing about birds is very different from writing the adventure stories which I originally wrote, which were location specific, which were wildlife specific to that area. When you're writing about birds, it just, the birds fly everywhere in the world. So I can have a story set in the Antarctic, okay? I can have a story set in the Arctic. I can have a story set in, say, in the Andes, okay, in the Sahara Desert, because birds travel everywhere, you know. So this has really opened the whole canvas for me. And I hopefully from next year I want to just increase this to about maybe 20, 25 books in the series over a period of time. They're doing well, kids are enjoying them, and I'm enjoying writing them.
So you're loving this challenge for writing only
Yeah.
for children, for this very specific age group.
Yeah, for these books for birds are from just 8 to 10 years old. Or you could say, of course, there's an overlap. I mean, older kids do read them, but yeah, it's a very specific because we have what we call picture books, and then we have chapter books. Okay, chapter books are for older kids, picture books are for the beginning readers. So these are actually in between. They straddle in between. They got pictures and they got chapters. So this is the in between age. And yeah, it's a stage where kids are actually learning to read. And actually, what happens is schools do encourage reading at this particular period. Later on, it'll become studies and marks and all that. But at this age, there's quite a bit of reading. You'd be surprised. And yeah, so that's where these books are.
I know it's now a difficult question to answer, but if I need you to pick one of your favorite in the series, which one would that be?
In the bird series?
Yeah, the bird series.
Well, in the bird series, I think the flamingo book,
Okay.
because I'm originally from Bombay and now I live in Pune. But I thought that book worked out well. It brought out the parts of Bombay I want to bring out. And yeah, I mean, I grew up there. There were seagulls. The flamingos came in much later into Mumbai. But I think that's the one which I would pick out.
One of your recent works was on snow leopards. So, and you love trekking. You just mentioned you trekked a lot. So how did that come along?
So actually, Snow Leopard book is not a recent book. It's quite a few years actually. But I actually, when I went to Everest as a kid, I remember that we in Nepal. The best thing is that you have these book libraries, huge libraries, and they cater to a certain specific set of people. People who are wanderers, dreamers, mountaineers. So they're very nice books which you couldn't go. They can just get lost out there, and you can actually take a book and return it. So, and I saw this book, The Snow Leopard, by Peter Matheson. I think you, of course, must have read it at some stages because you read so many good books in wildlife. So I read that and I was fascinated that you had a team of people going to the home of the snow leopard to search for the snow leopard and spending 3 months out there, and they never found it. So all evidence of the presence of the leopard was there. This leopard just fascinated me. And so, I felt that because nobody knows about snow leopards in our country. Even I didn't know as a kid, until I actually picked up this book. I wasn't aware of them. But these are Indian animals right across the Himalayas of ours. They're there and nobody knows about them. They're considered amongst the most beautiful creatures in the world. And of course, the poaching and what's happening, and for the skins, for the way the human animal conflict, which has played out. All that I wanted to bring that out. And I was lucky in the sense that you might, of course, I'm sure you know Joanna Van Grissen and you know Raghu Chundawat. So I was friends with them, and Raghu said, "Listen, just come along. I have this expedition where we search for snow leopards all the time. I mean, every year, and we get a lot of foreigners who come here, and the money we make from these trips and guiding people to show snow leopards is used in my research. So come along with me." And so I went along, and it was a fascinating experience. And the story actually came out from that experience. And yeah, it was great. I enjoyed the entire research of this book, and that Snow Leopard has sold many, many thousands of copies, and it's still a very fresh book and is doing well. Yeah.
And you also take these stories to several cities that you tour and speak to kids in school, kind of thing. So tell us about that interaction when you tell the stories in front of a large audience of kids and all. How are the reactions? What's the feedback do you get?
So this is a very important part of my life as a writer, because you can't just write in isolation and then you know your books sell like that. It doesn't work like that. Though you love it that you just wrote and people read, but it takes a lot more effort than that, particularly when you're starting off the ground. And I was very lucky that you know when I wrote my first book, Lakshadweep Adventure, I went around to a few schools and handed it to some principals to read. And bingo, they were used as readers, as specific readers in class. Uh, you know, just like when we grew up, we had books like Black Beauty and Tom Brown's School Days, basically the colonial hangover of English books, you know, written only by the English, and only they could write good English books for children. That is changing now. And I was very lucky in the sense that schools started picking up these books en masse because there were no such books available. So I had all the Delhi public schools using my books as readers. I had schools across India picking them up, and over the years using them over and over again with each fresh batch. So that was when I realized that schools specifically love this kind of work. And a lot of schools call me, and they keep calling me all the time. And I enjoy this interaction because I love interacting with kids. And what I basically show them is very simple. I don't read from my books because I think that's the most boring and most ridiculous thing you can do. I actually show them slides of what went into the research. Like, for example, in the Snow Leopard adventure book, I show them pictures of Ladakh, Leh, and then how we moved out, went searching for snow leopards, how we climbed into the highest reaches, the glaciers we saw, the camping we did, you know, and the snow leopard we found. And you put that all together, it makes a fascinating experience. I have similar things in my Andaman stories, how I researched those books and all the effort that went into. And this is what really gets kids going. When they see these places, they hear about which they've never heard about before. It's very, you know, because I mean, syllabus is syllabus, and schools stick to the syllabus. And syllabus excludes snow leopards, excludes Himalayas, Andamans, except for what geographic or economical this thing they can contribute to India. But the actual wildlife, the beauty, you know, the softer stuff, they just don't. So I do that through my slideshows, and that seems to work very well with kids. And schools keep calling me, and for me, it's a great opportunity: A, to connect with kids, and B, to get them to read the books which I've written, and you know, try and imbibe something. And the most satisfying thing is that if through my interaction with them, that I have somehow got them towards wildlife and wilderness areas and travel, made a little tweak in them, reached out and touched them.
But do you think our education policy should do more, kind of thing? As you said, that syllabus, because it's not part of the syllabus, the kids are not aware of our natural heritage, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Actually, you know, the way a lot of people are looking at education today, you need to strip down of the entire system of questions and exams and working only so that you get marks. It really is a self-defeating way of doing things. A lot of schools, I mean, there are several experimental schools that are coming out, trying out different things, where experiential kind of stuff is done, where they bring in experts, they try and widen the experience of the kids. It's all in nascent stages, being at different levels from different schools. But I'm hoping that now with the latest pandemic problem and all that, that people are going to see education in a different light. And today, nowadays, it's, you know, with education moving so much to the electronic board, which you can use videos, which you can use so many tools for education. Uh, I'm hoping things will change, because they have to change. What we have currently is it's it's the industrial style. You know how what we say, that this original system of education originated during the industrial revolution time, and it hasn't changed much since then. Now we're living in a completely different era. You know, there's so many different kinds of skills besides industrial skills that we need to survive in this world, or to go ahead in this world. We need to adjust education to that. It's happening. Um, it'll happen soon, I'm pretty sure. This whole system will be turned on its head.
So, Deepak, you now have a new publisher. You signed up with Penguin. So, tell us about the other exciting stuff which we are going to see in this year and the coming years.
Well, at this moment, it's a rare privilege that an author gets. I don't know, people might not call it a privilege, but it's something which you don't get, is a chance to actually rewrite your old books. Because as you look back to your work, say, which is 10 years and more before, you realize that you've come so much further as a writer. So I've got this option to actually rewrite the books and bringing them up to speed as to the way I write today, and where I am as a writer today. And so that's really the process that's going on just now. We've out of my 8 old adventure stories books, 4 have been done. I have 4 remaining, and each of them takes some time, to rewrite and redo and rethink them out. We are not changing the plot at all. The plot is identical, but just making the writing that much crisper and nicer. Bringing in more things into it. So that's the work which is going on. It'll occupy me till the end of this year. Then next year, that's when the new books will start coming, in the sense that I'm going to work on that dolphin story on the coastline. It's a story I really want to do. Then I also want to work on the bird books. And the bird books are easy to write, in the sense I don't have to travel anywhere. Research is done sitting at home. And I said, there's so much scope. I can set these books anywhere in the world. And so, yeah, so these are the books which I'm going to be working on: the bird books and the more adventure stories from this thing.
Deepak, how about you? Since you're rewriting the older books, is there any plan to also translate them into other Indian languages? Because the English speaking, both you and I write in English, but there's a huge audience for Indian languages, and wherever I travel, especially in rural India, I see the vacuum.
So I had a Maharashtrian gentleman who did translate these books into Marathi. He was very inspired by the books. He did it. I don't know what really happened eventually. I gave him permission. In those days, I was on my own. I was without Penguin, so I could give him the permission. Since then, now it's basically in the hands of my publisher. I think the translations will happen if these books really take off India-wide and there's a big interest. Then the translations will happen, because the publisher who translates these books, has to be sure that he has a audience for them. So really it works the other way around. When the publisher who's going to publish it in the local vernacular language has to approach me or Penguin. So we have to, I guess that'll happen when the books are really well known, and obviously the books are reasonably well known, but there has to come to a certain stage, a critical mass. At that point, maybe that'll happen. But yes, I'd be very happy if it happens. And at the end of the day, it's between my publisher and them. But I will certainly push that it doesn't. It's not the money that counts. It's getting the books widely known. But I'm hoping it'll happen.
And my last question is: there's also a trend in audiobooks, especially with children and all. So, is there any plans of kind of doing or
at this point?
Stories? Yeah.
At this point, I don't think there is. I think Penguin is going a little slow on that in India on audiobooks. At the moment, it's only Kindle and regular bookstore sales, and but audiobooks are not really at this point. They're not doing it with any children's books in India. Okay. Because it's we Indian writers for children are facing a problem in this across the board in India, is that our specific audience are, you would say, westernized schools, which like you and I went to, all right? But in those schools, the kids actually read a lot of international books. And so Indian writers take a backseat out there. So, we're still expanding and, for Indian writers to be taken equally well as those, then we need to up the standards. So we need a lot more writers. We need to have, like, Indian writing is taken off for adults worldwide. It's taken off because a lot of good writers are coming to it. A lot of, it's happened over a period of years. We need the same thing to happen to our kind of writing. So once that takes off, then I'm sure audiobooks will happen. But at the moment, we're still struggling against, these wonderful international titles which are there. So we have to create a list of Indian books which will stand up against those. And that's happening. It's bound to happen. And that's when I think audiobooks will certainly take off. But at this point, that's not really happening.
A quick last question is, which is the title we are going to see this year?
No, not this year. It'll be next year, because this year I'm just working on these books. But the dolphin story, I don't have a title for it. I'm going to be working on it. There are a few stories which are going on in my head for the bird books also. But the title comes out last. That's the whole thing. You first write the book, and then the title. Eventually, when you have the whole story in front of you, then a suitable title comes out. But yeah, this is the endeavor. I'm going to be working on the dolphin story. I'm going to be working on bird stories. Let's see what comes out of it.
Thank you, Deepak. Absolute pleasure having you on this show. Thank you so much, and best of luck for all those books coming.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Thanks so much, Ananda.